How dark was the world before electricity? Forgotten secrets. Imagine a world where twilight descends, shadows envelop every corner, and light is just a faint glimmer of hope. We've grown so accustomed to electricity that we often forget that just a few hundred years ago, nightlife was a completely different story, full of mysteries and even dangers. Are you ready to travel back in time with us to discover what cities looked like before electric lights illuminated them? Today, we're going on a journey through time, back to an era where illumination was a privilege, a luxury, and often a continuous struggle against the darkness. Let's uncover the forgotten secrets of a world that we, modern people, can hardly imagine. The first lighthouses in the dark, oil lamps and candles. Before the bright electric lights turned night into day, humans had to rely on primitive but significant light sources to combat the darkness. Two of the earliest and most common lighthouses in human history were oil lamps and candles. They weren't just tools for illumination, they were also symbols of civilization, security, and sometimes even luxury. Ancient oil lamps, a source of security and power. Thousands of years ago, oil lamps played an indispensable role in human life. They weren't merely lighting fixtures, but important tools for ensuring security and deterring theft, especially at night when darkness loomed and brought countless dangers. The faint glow of an oil lamp, though not brilliant, was enough to ward off some fear, signaling presence and vigilance. In ancient Rome, owning and using oil lamps was a clear sign of status and wealth. Only truly affluent families could afford to light the front of their homes with vegetable oil lamps. This not only displayed their prosperity, but also symbolized power and protection. Furthermore, maintaining this light was no simple task. These families often had specialized slaves called laternarius, whose sole duty was to tend the lamps, ensuring they remained lit and provided continuous light for their masters. This highlights the importance and complexity of managing light in a society without electricity. The oil lamp industry was not just a craft, but a massive industry that thrived for thousands of years. What's astonishing is that throughout that long period, the basic design of oil lamps didn't change much, proving their efficiency and applicability. Archaeologists have found intact oil lamps estimated to be up to 2,300 years old, showcasing the durability of ancient materials and crafting techniques. Modena in ancient Rome was not just a city, but a leading global center for oil lamp production at the time. It gathered many famous oil lamp brands, each with unique characteristics, such as Fortis, Fitaspi, and Strabili. The competition and popularity of these brands led to an interesting phenomenon. Counterfeiting of these brands appeared even back then. This indicates the high value and demand for oil lamps, to the extent that people were willing to fake them for profit. Despite their popularity and importance, oil lamps still had many limitations. Most oil lamps usually had a simple, compact design, primarily used in indoor spaces like living rooms, bedrooms, or family activity areas. They weren't enough to illuminate large streets, public squares, or other crowded areas. Their light was only sufficient for orientation in narrow spaces or to create a small illuminated area around the user. This meant that even in large cities, most streets remained cloaked in thick darkness when night fell, creating a completely different scene compared to the modern cities we are familiar with. The faint power of candles, flickering but costly light. If oil lamps were practical and provided security, candles offered a more shimmering, softer beauty, and they accompanied humans for an even longer period. People learned how to make candles over 5,000 years ago, an astonishing history for such a seemingly simple object. The materials used for candles also clearly reflected social stratification. Candles for wealthy nobles and in medieval churches were often made from pure beeswax, which provided a clearer light and less smoke. In contrast, candles for commoners, who couldn't afford better, were typically made from animal fat, tallow. which often had an unpleasant smell and produced more smoke when burned. In terms of energy efficiency, candles were truly extremely inefficient. Only about 1% of a candle's light was visible to the human eye, while a modern light bulb can convert about 10% of energy into visible light. This means that to achieve the same amount of light, you would need an enormous number of candles. To better illustrate this weakness, medieval candles were estimated to be 80 times dimmer than modern electric light bulbs. Imagine trying to read a book or perform detailed work under that dim glow. Due to the weak light of candles, people were forced to become more creative to maximize the available light. For example, gold leaf was used to cover artworks not for luxury, but to make them glow brighter in the dim candle light. This thin layer of gold could reflect light extremely well, helping details on artwork stand out more and catch the eye in low-light conditions. This shows the ingenuity and practicality of ancient people in applying materials. Buying candles was also a significant expense, especially for ordinary families. In the 1330s, a pound of tallow candles cost as much as 3 ceramic cooking pots, or the equivalent of a chair. This was a considerable price, indicating that candles were a luxury item for many. Even a large house, to maintain light for one night, could consume an estimated 100 pounds of wax. This colossal figure shows the financial burden that illumination placed on wealthy families, and also explains why nightlife largely took place in darkness for the majority of the population. Do you remember the first time you tried lighting a candle? Did that experience bring any special feeling to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Natural light and urban architecture. When artificial light was scarce and expensive, humans learned to make the most of the only natural light source available: sunlight and reflected light. This strongly shaped urban architecture and how people interacted with their living spaces. Grand structures were not just residences or places of worship, but massive machines for gathering and directing light. Churches and sunlight, a fusion of faith and astronomy. From early times, humans had a deep connection with natural cycles, especially the movement of the sun. Huge and mysterious architectural marvels like Stonehenge were built not only for worship, but also in precise alignment with the sun's movements, acting as giant observatories to mark solstices and equinoxes. This connection continued to be clearly demonstrated in medieval Christian religious architecture. Many medieval Christian churches were built with meticulous calculation so that the rising sun's light would shine directly onto the altar before any other interior space. This was not just a construction technique, but also carried deep symbolic meaning, representing divinity and the presence of the sacred as a new day began. The morning light streaming through windows, illuminating the altar, created a sacred and inspiring space for worshippers. A prime example of sophisticated light direction is the Holy Cross Monastery in Petrauti, Romania, built in the 15th century. This structure was perfectly aligned so that sunlight would stream along the length of the church and touch the altar at important prayer times throughout the day. This not only created an impressive visual effect, but also supported religious ceremonies. Furthermore, the monastery's windows were carefully placed to illuminate frescoes of saints on their specific feast days as a way to honor and bring their stories to life. Remarkably, this monastery even tells the story of Saint John the Baptist through a sequence of light over 30 days. Each day, a different ray of light would illuminate a specific part of the fresco, guiding viewers through stages in Saint John the Baptist's life, creating a unique and mesmerizing spiritual experience. This testifies to the profound understanding of astronomy and architecture possessed by ancient church builders. Mirrors and interiors, reflecting life in the dark. Before electricity became an indispensable part of life, mirrors were not just objects for viewing one's reflection or decorating homes. Instead, they were a crucial part of interior design with a very practical purpose. reflecting natural light throughout the house. In a world where artificial light was weak and expensive, every ray of natural light was precious, and mirrors became the optimal tool to utilize them. A room with mirrors would appear significantly brighter and more spacious than one without. The mirror manufacturing industry, especially for high-quality mirrors, was once a closely guarded secret. Venice, with its exclusive mirror-making techniques, dominated the industry for centuries. To protect its technological secrets, Venice even imposed the death penalty on any craftsman who revealed mirror-making methods to outsiders. This monopoly gave Venice an enormous economic advantage. However, constant competition led Louis XIV of France, famous for his luxury and splendor, to seek every means to break Venice's monopoly. He succeeded in bringing skilled Venetian mirror craftsmen to France to furnish the magnificent Palace of Versailles, particularly the famous Hall of Mirrors. This not only demonstrated the desire of monarchies for mirror technology, but also showed its importance in creating bright and lavish spaces. To maximize light reflection, mirrors were often strategically combined with weak artificial light sources like candlesticks and candelabras. These mirror frames were often gilded with gold, a metal with excellent light-reflecting properties. The gold plating not only added elegance, but more importantly, it helped maximize the amount of light reflected from candles. Instead of just direct light from the candle, that light would be amplified and dispersed throughout the room by the gilded mirror, creating a much brighter space than if only candles were used. This demonstrates the sophistication and meticulous planning of ancient people in their use of light. Third, nightlife and its dangers. Before electricity, night didn't just bring darkness, it was an entirely different world, fraught with challenges, dangers, and distinctive social practices. Nightlife wasn't vibrant parties or brightly lit streets, as it is today, but a struggle with darkness, where personal safety was often severely jeopardized. Stage and unexpected pauses, art and lighting techniques. In 17th century European theaters and opera houses, stage lighting was a major challenge and a technical marvel of its time. Stages were typically lit by hundreds, even thousands, of candles placed on large chandeliers suspended above the audience and performers. The flickering light from these candles created an enchanting atmosphere, but also posed many problems. One of the biggest problems was that candles produced a lot of heat. With such large numbers, the temperature in the theater could become stifling, causing discomfort for both actors and audience. Moreover, candles only burned for about an hour before needing replacement. This created a special requirement for composers and playwrights. They had to carefully time candle replacements during intermissions between acts. The main acts of a play or opera were often limited to about 33 to 39 minutes, while shorter secondary acts lasted about 25 minutes. The brief duration of these secondary acts was designed to provide enough time for technical staff to quickly replace hundreds of burned-out candles. This was a technical factor that had to be integrated into the script structure, directly affecting the rhythm and duration of performances. Dangers from clothing and light, the looming threat of fire. In a world reliant on open flames for illumination, the risk of fire was ever present and a constant threat. Accidentally knocking over a candle or allowing a flame to contact flammable material could cause a large, fast-spreading, and difficult-to-control fire, especially in the wooden structures of that era. This danger became even more severe with changes in fashion. The thin, light, and voluminous dresses of 19th century women became popular thanks to mass production, making them more accessible to various social classes. However, their lightweight fabric and wide, flowing styles made them a horrifying fire hazard when exposed to candles, open flames, or gas lamps. A small spark, even a minor oversight, could cause a dress to ignite in an instant, leading to devastating consequences. The severity of this issue is highlighted by a shocking statistic. It is estimated that in 1860, the number of women who died from dress fires caused by indoor lighting was equivalent to the number of women murdered in the U.S. in 2014. This figure shows that the danger of dress-related fires was a brutal reality, an integral part of daily life before the electric age. It forced people to live in constant caution, especially women with their easily flammable clothing. Link boys and night watch, protectors and deceivers in the dark. Going out at night before electricity was a risky and dangerous act. Dark streets and desolate alleys harbored countless threats, from thieves to unforeseen accidents. To cope with this reality, certain professions emerged to provide safety, though sometimes with downsides. From the Middle Ages to the Victorian era, link boys, torch-bearing boys, were a familiar sight on European streets. They earned a living by standing outside inns, restaurants, or entertainment venues, and carrying torches to guide patrons home. This service was incredibly necessary, especially for intoxicated people or those unfamiliar with the dark streets. The light from their torches not only helped with orientation, but also dispelled some fear. However, not all link boys were honest. They were also known to take advantage of drunken customers, leading them into dark alleys to rob them of their belongings. The trust placed in them was a double-edged sword. Additionally, link boys were hired to guide people through the thick fogs of London, where visibility was severely limited even during the day. They became reliable eyes and guides in extreme weather conditions. Besides private link boys, cities also had night watch forces. These were guards who patrolled at night, with the main duties of detecting intruders, protecting city security, and warning about fires. They were the patrols in the darkness. Their footsteps and shouts were a rare reassurance in the silent night. What's astonishing is that this tradition lasted for centuries. Even as recently as 2020, a man named Renato Hausler still worked as a night watchman in Lausanne, Switzerland. He continued the work of patrolling the top of the cathedral, inheriting a tradition that spanned 6 centuries. This shows the importance and longevity of community protection in the dark, even as lighting technology has vastly developed. What do you think was the hardest part about living in a city without electricity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The dawn of a new lighting era, gas lights and electricity. Thousands of years after humans began using oil lamps and candles, a revolution in lighting slowly ignited. The advent of gas lights and subsequently electricity completely transformed the appearance of cities, extending operating hours and reshaping the rhythm of social life. Gaslighting, paving the way for bright streets. The late 18th century saw the first breakthroughs in using coal gas for illumination. William Murdoch, a Scottish engineer, is credited with bringing this technology into practical application in the 1790s. He successfully lit his home in 1792 and his factory in 1798 with coal gas. These were important milestones, proving the immense potential of gas as a more efficient light source. However, it wasn't until 1807 that the first public gas street lighting was demonstrated at Pall Mall, London, by Frederick Albert Windsor. This was a revolutionary event, astonishing citizens and completely changing their perception of urban lighting capabilities. Gas provided much stronger and more stable light than candles or oil lamps. The success of this demonstration paved the way for widespread implementation of gas lighting systems. By 1823, in just 16 years, over 345 kilometers of London streets were lit by approximately 40,000 gas lamps. London quickly became one of the pioneering cities in modern lighting. The spread of gas lamps wasn't limited to London. Baltimore was the first American city to install gas streetlights in 1816, marking the beginning of a new era of light on the continent. Paris, the famous City of Lights, also began installing gas lamps on columns in 1820. By 1857, the grand boulevards of Paris were brightly lit by thousands of gas lamps, earning the city the nickname City of Lights that we know today. The arrival of gas lighting had a profound impact on economic and social life. They extended working hours and helped stores stay open later. Factories could operate at night, increasing productivity. Shops could welcome customers longer, boosting commerce. Nightlife began to become more vibrant, with cafes and theaters able to operate later. However, gas lamps also brought their own dangers and inconveniences. They could cause leaks of toxic gas, posing a terrifying risk of explosion, and often emitted an unpleasant odor. Maintenance also required caution. The miles-walking lamplighters, unsung heroes of light. Behind every brightly lit gas lamp was the effort of a team of lamplighters. They have a long and proud history, unsung heroes who brought light to the city every evening. Their work was anything but simple. Each sunset, they would go around the city, carrying a ladder or a long pole, carefully lighting each lamp one by one. And when dawn broke, they would return to extinguish each lamp, preparing for a new day. This was a job that required perseverance, precision, and good health. They had to know every street, every lamp's location by heart. To visualize the scale of this work, a 1939 article reported on John Maher, a dedicated lamplighter who walked an estimated 150,000 miles, about 241,400 kilometers, in 43 years as a lamplighter. This distance is equivalent to walking nearly 6 times around the Earth's equator. A truly incredible figure that demonstrates the tremendous dedication of these individuals to bringing light to their communities. The dawn of electricity, the era of eternal light. However, the pinnacle of the lighting revolution truly came with the advent of electricity, and the central figure was none other than Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison changed the world in 1879 when he created a practical and durable carbon filament vacuum light bulb. Although there were earlier rudimentary versions of light bulbs, Edison's bulb was a breakthrough. They were not only cheaper and brighter, but also significantly more durable than arc lamps, which had been used briefly before. This invention ushered in a new era of stable, safe, and efficient light. Paris once again asserted its position as the City of Lights by becoming the first city in the world to have electric streetlights in 1878, using arc lamps. By 1881, about 4,000 of these lamps had been installed throughout the city. Arc lamps provided very strong light, enough to illuminate large squares and main boulevards. In the US, arc lamps were also quickly adopted. By 1890, over 130,000 arc lamps had been installed, often placed on towering moonlight towers. These towers were designed to illuminate a wide area from above, creating a diffused light similar to moonlight. However, the light from Edison's incandescent bulb was truly the future. Mosley Street in Newcastle, England, holds the honor of being the first street in the world lit by incandescent light bulbs in 1879, the same year Edison invented them. This shows the rapid pace of innovation and application of new technology. Timișoara, Romania, was also one of the pioneering cities, becoming the first city in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy to have public electric lights in 1884. From there, electricity spread throughout the world at lightning speed, permanently changing how we live and work. And the lighting revolution continues to this day. Modern LED lights, first developed by Nick Holonyak in 1962, brought another significant leap forward. LED technology uses 75% less energy and lasts up to 25 times longer than traditional incandescent bulbs. This not only saves energy, but also significantly reduces maintenance costs. Milan, Italy, was one of the first major cities to recognize this benefit. and fully converted its public lighting system to LED. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment "Yes" to let us know you're still following. Life changes and what was lost. The advent of electricity was not just a technological advancement, but a profound cultural and social revolution. It completely reshaped the rhythm of life, habits, and even humanity's relationship with the natural world around us. However, along with immense benefits, we also lost some precious things. Life rhythm and society, a shift from natural cycles. Before electricity, human life was organically intertwined with the natural day-night cycle. People simply slept and woke up earlier to take advantage of natural light. Most daily activities were carried out under sunlight. Dinner usually ended the workday, and people typically went to bed around 8:30 p.m. and woke up around 5 a.m. This was a completely different rhythm of life compared to our modern society, where artificial light allows us to extend activities late into the night. There is evidence suggesting that pre-industrial humans often slept in a pattern called segmented sleep. Instead of sleeping for 8 hours straight as currently recommended, they typically went to bed for a few hours, known as first sleep, then woke up for 1 to 2 hours. During this waking period, they might chat with each other, attend to personal matters, reflect, or even engage in illicit activities without fear of detection in the dark. Afterward, they would go back to sleep until dawn, known as second sleep. This sleep pattern shows how humans adjusted their routines to fit an environment lacking artificial light. Although oil lamps strained eyes when reading and limited nighttime activities, life without electricity fostered a stronger sense of community and social interaction. Without TV, internet, or enough light to read alone, people often went outside in the evening during power outages or simply to seek companionship. They gathered to talk, play board games, cards, or even just share stories and life experiences with neighbors. The darkness outside became a catalyst for tighter human connections, creating a more cohesive and mutually supportive community. Relationship with darkness, less fearful but full of challenges. In the dark cities of the past, darkness wasn't always a terrifying enemy. People learned to adapt and live with it. Some activities requiring clear light, like cutting fingernails or getting a haircut, were often considered taboo or unsafe after sundown, as the lack of light could lead to mistakes or accidents. However, those accustomed to darkness were less afraid of it. They developed a familiarity and sometimes a certain comfort with the night. Some studies even suggest their night vision might have been better than those living in environments with abundant artificial light. The greatest fear in the dark was often not the unseen, but tangible threats like snakes and dangerous creatures that often lurked in the shadows. Besides lighting challenges, poor urban planning also contributed to noise pollution. Even from ancient Roman times, there were records of continuous urban noise from vehicles, manufacturing activities, and daily life, affecting sleep and daily living. Noise and darkness were two parallel factors shaping the living experience in ancient cities. The lost starry heaven, the sadness of the modern night sky. One of the greatest things the world lost with the advent of electricity was the brilliant night sky. Before artificial light polluted the atmosphere, cities were dark enough that the Milky Way could cast shadows on the ground. Imagine that majestic sight. Billions of stars twinkling overhead, forming such a dense carpet of light that their faint glow was enough to cast your shadow. Comets, meteors, and even the Andromeda Galaxy, a galaxy millions of light years away, could be seen with the naked eye even over the largest cities. The night sky was not just a beautiful sight, but an endless source of inspiration for science, philosophy, and art. It connected humans to the vast universe, reminding us of our place in a boundless world. Today, it's a sad reality, that 99% of the population in Europe and the US lives under the impact of light pollution. Scattered artificial light from cities, streets, and homes has created a haze of light that obscures the view of the night sky. Many younger generations are growing up without ever having seen the Milky Way with their naked eyes. This is a huge loss, not only aesthetically, but also scientifically and spiritually. We traded the convenience of electric light to lose a part of our connection to the vast universe. If you could go back in time, what from life before electricity would you most want to experience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How people lived before air conditioning. Do you remember those scorching summer days before air conditioning became a part of everyday life? When the pavement seemed to melt, the air felt heavy, and stepping outside meant instantly breaking a sweat. For those who lived through it, that heat is impossible to forget. It seeped into every brick, every wooden floorboard, shaping daily life in ways most today can't imagine. In this video, we're going to revisit those blazing summers and uncover the clever, determined, and sometimes surprising ways people stayed cool. Let's turn back the clock and rediscover the art of surviving summer before the luxury of AC changed everything. Ancient methods. The modern air conditioning we know today is actually a relatively recent invention, but humans, they've been finding ways to cool themselves and their living spaces for thousands of years. It's been a long-standing battle against the heat. Let's look back at ancient civilizations. They were incredibly smart and innovative. Did you know, even in ancient Egypt, they had simple yet effective cooling techniques? Imagine this: a mud brick house in Egypt, the sun beating down. To cool down, they would hang mats made of reeds or linen fabric, which had been soaked in water, over their windows. When wind blew through these damp screens, the evaporating water would draw heat from the air, bringing cool, moist breezes into the room. This is the basic principle of evaporative cooling, a technique still used in some places today. It didn't create cold air like AC, but it definitely made a significant difference in the dry desert heat. Further west, the ancient Roman Empire also had quite remarkable cooling techniques. They built complex aqueduct systems. Some systems even had water flowing through the walls of their homes. The cool water would absorb heat from the walls, making the interior space much more comfortable. Think about it. It was a form of ancient, radiant cooling, using the stable temperature of groundwater to combat the heat outside. It was a wonderful combination of engineering and natural resources. And in medieval Persia, they developed distinctive architectural structures called wind catchers. These tall structures were designed to capture wind and funnel it down into underground water cisterns below the house. As the air passed over the cool water surface, it would be cooled and pick up moisture, then be drawn back up and circulated into the living spaces. This was a natural ventilation system combined with evaporative cooling and utilizing the stable temperature of the earth. It created a flow of cool, fresh air circulating throughout the house, effective even on days without strong winds. It's proof that humans understood the importance of moving air and using water for cooling early on. In Asia, particularly ancient China, fans were a familiar cooling tool from very early times. Not only did they have elegant handheld paper and silk fans, but they also developed large fan systems powered by humans or water, often used in palaces or large spaces. Even if it was just moving air, a gentle breeze on a hot summer day was enough to provide instant relief. Even as late as the 17th century, Dutch inventor Cornelis Drebbel experimented with a method of cooling air by adding salt to water to increase the evaporative effect. He gave a demonstration for King James I of England and is credited with lowering the temperature in the room by a few degrees. Although this method didn't become widespread due to its complexity and cost, it shows that people were constantly searching, experimenting with new ways to beat the heat. Lifestyle adjustments and daily habits. Facing the heat, Not only did house architecture change, but the way people lived, their daily schedules, also had to adjust. Life before AC forced people to live more in tune with the rhythm of nature. The first and most obvious adjustment was waking up and working early. Early morning was the coolest time of the day, especially before the sun climbed high. Therefore, strenuous tasks requiring a lot of effort were often prioritized for the morning. Farmers went to the fields early, factory workers arrived early, and homemakers also completed the main household chores in the morning. Taking advantage of this precious cool time to get as much done as possible. And conversely, when the heat peaked in the afternoon, some places adopted the habit of taking a midday break, also known as siesta. Like in other tropical climates around the world, small towns or shops might close for a few hours during the hottest part of the afternoon. People went home to rest, avoiding going outside. This was a simple yet practical acknowledgement. Trying to do heavy work in peak heat was both inefficient and dangerous to health. When not indoors, people sought ways to spend time outdoors or in cooler places. Porches were a popular choice, as we mentioned. Parks with dense green shade became ideal destinations to escape the heat, or places near water like rivers, lakes. The sea always attracted people to swim, dip their feet, or simply sit by the shore to feel the cool air rising from the water. Going to the movies was another common way to escape the heat, especially since movie theaters were among the first public places to install AC. Visiting large department stores or restaurants with AC was also a tactic. And of course, basements, which typically maintained a stable and much cooler temperature than upper floors, were a great refuge from the heat. At night, when the heat still lingered indoors, many people chose to sleep outdoors. We've talked about sleeping porches, but in crowded cities, where wide porches weren't available, people might spread mats and sleep on fire escapes. There are even stories about sleeping on rooftops. Though risky, sometimes the desperation due to heat drove people to take chances. Pulling beds out into the yard was also a common practice, or simply bringing blankets and mats to sleep in parks or along riverbanks, lake shores, to enjoy the cooler night air. Sleeping under the stars, with the sound of crickets and a gentle breeze, must have been a memorable experience for many. Eating and drinking also had adjustments to deal with the heat. Preparing cold meals was prioritized to avoid standing over a hot stove for long in the stifling heat. Salads, sandwiches, light dishes that didn't require much cooking were popular. If cooking was necessary, it was often done in the early morning or late evening after the sun had set to minimize heat radiating inside the house. And of course, cold drinks were essential. Iced tea, lemonade, fresh fruit juices were wonderful, refreshing choices. And ice cream, a favorite snack of all ages, both delicious and helping to cool down quickly. Who doesn't have memories of summer days linked to ice cream? Staying hydrated was extremely important. Without AC, the body relied on sweating to cool itself. Dehydration happened very quickly in the heat, and the risk of sunstroke and heat exhaustion was very real. People always carried water or found ways to replenish fluids. And one of the most effective, simplest ways to cool down was using water, bathing or cooling off with water. A cool shower at the end of the day was a wonderful remedy for a hot body. For children, playing in sprinklers in the yard was endless fun. Or swimming in rivers, lakes, or the sea was the most effective and enjoyable way to cool down. Even simple things like soaking your feet in a basin of cold water or sucking on a piece of ice, remember the story about sucking ice from the milk truck, could provide instant relief. Smart architecture, the house as a cooling machine. Looking back at America in the 19th and early 20th centuries, before air conditioning became standard, you'll notice houses were built very differently from today. That wasn't by accident. Homes back then were designed incredibly smartly to fend off the heat themselves. The house wasn't just a place to live, it was like a giant cooling machine, using natural elements like wind, shade, and materials to maintain comfort inside. One of the most easily noticeable architectural elements was porches. Nearly every house in the 19th century had a porch, whether large or small. Their function wasn't just a place to greet guests or put a few rocking chairs. The porch was a wonderful natural shield to block direct sunlight from hitting windows and walls. It created a shaded area, a buffer zone, between the intense heat outside and the interior space. But a porch was more than that. It was an outdoor living space. On hot summer days, families would often gather on the porch, eating dinner on the porch, chatting on the porch, reading on the porch. The air on the porch was always cooler than inside the house in the late afternoon. It was where the whole family gathered, where neighbors dropped by, where life happened slowly, more connected to the outside air. Do you remember the smell of jasmine or the sound of crickets on the porch in the evening? And a special variation of the porch was the sleeping porch. It might sound strange to later generations, but sleeping porches used to be very common, especially in the American South, where heat and humidity could be brutal all night. Even in the North, they had sleeping porches. It could be a small room with a roof but only screens around it, or a small porch built on the second floor of the house. Why sleep there? Simply because the night air outside was often cooler than inside the house, where heat had accumulated all day. Sleeping on a sleeping porch provided a feeling of openness, breathing in the fresh summer night air, although sometimes you also had to deal with mosquitoes or other insects. Remember the story about putting bed legs in cans of kerosene to keep ants away when sleeping outdoors? That shows how determined people were to find a cool night's sleep. Next were the windows. Back then, windows weren't just for looking outside. The number and size of windows increased over time, partly because glass became cheaper, but mainly because they were incredibly important cooling tools, especially the double-hung windows. This design allowed you to open both the upper and lower sashes of the window at the same time. Why do that? Hot air is lighter than cold air, so it rises. By opening the top part of the window, the hot air in the room would escape. At the same time, opening the bottom part of the window would draw cooler air from outside in. This was a simple but very effective way to create natural air circulation in the room. In addition, using taller windows than usual also helped create a stronger airflow, and the placement of windows and doors was an art. They often built houses so that the orientation of the house and the windows, doors, were aligned. This allowed maximum use of cross breezes, the natural airflow blowing through the house from one side to the other. By simply opening opposing windows, a cool breeze would sweep through the entire house, carrying away hot air and providing instant relief. Do you remember the feeling of a sudden cool breeze blowing through the house on a sweltering summer day? That was the effect of cross breezes. And look up, high ceilings. Old houses often had soaring high ceilings. This didn't just create a sense of spaciousness, it also had a very important cooling function. Hot air always tends to rise. High ceilings helped keep that layer of hot air up high, away from the human living space below. This made the main living area feel significantly cooler. Natural ventilation systems were further enhanced in many ways. A spacious central hall with aligned openings is a typical example, creating a main ventilation axis in the house. On the roof, you might sometimes see small structures sticking up called belvederes or cupolas. They weren't just for decoration. These structures acted like a chimney. Hot air from the floors below would rise, enter the central hall, and be drawn upwards, exiting through windows or vents in the belvedere cupola. This effect helped continuously pull hot air out of the house, while drawing cooler air in through the lower windows. Even smaller details were calculated. Transom windows, those small windows above interior doors, allowed air to circulate between rooms, even when the main door was closed for privacy. This maintained a continuous airflow throughout the entire house. In crowded apartment buildings, especially in cities like New York, air shafts or ventilation spaces between adjacent buildings also played an important role in enhancing air circulation, although their original purpose might have also been related to housing regulations and public health. And another incredibly smart solution: summer kitchens. Cooking generates a significant amount of heat. To avoid heating up the entire main house during hot summer months, many families had a separate kitchen building or a kitchen area away from the main house. This kept the heat and even the cooking smells, even if sometimes very appealing, from affecting the main living space. Regarding materials and structure, old houses often had very thick walls made of brick, stone, or adobe in drier climates. Thick walls acted as an excellent natural insulator, keeping the interior temperature more stable, cooler during the day and warmer, or cooler depending on the season, at night. Sloping roofs and wide eaves also helped shield the house from intense sunlight and efficiently shed rainwater. Finally, the landscaping around the house also played an important role. Planting greenery, especially trees with wide canopies around the house, created natural shade. Tree shade helped reduce the air temperature around the house and prevented direct sunlight from hitting walls and the roof. Using awnings or shutters outside windows was also an effective way to block intense sunlight from shining directly into the house while still allowing wind to circulate through gaps. All these architectural elements, when combined, show that people back then considered the natural environment very carefully when building homes. They didn't try to fight nature with powerful technology, but learned to live in harmony with it. Please share your memories of summers before air conditioning in the comments below. Using water, ice, and fans. Besides adjusting architecture and habits, people actively used available tools and resources to create coolness. Three main elements were effectively utilized: water, ice, and fans. Using water for evaporative cooling is an age-old technique. A common way was hanging damp curtains or cloths in front of open windows. When wind blew through the moist fabric, water evaporated, drawing heat from the air and making the air entering the room cooler while also increasing humidity. This method was especially effective in dry climates, where the air could absorb a lot of moisture. In humid climates, it was less effective and could even make the air feel more uncomfortable. A mechanical version of this principle was evaporative coolers, also known as swamp coolers. These devices work by blowing hot, dry air through a wet material, usually wood fiber pads or other porous material, constantly dampened with water. As the air passes through, the water evaporates, cooling the air before it's blown into the room. Like hanging damp curtains, swamp coolers were very effective in dry climates, but almost useless in places with high humidity. Ice was a valuable resource for cooling. From the 19th century, the industry of harvesting and transporting ice grew strong. People cut ice from frozen lakes in the winter and stored it in insulated ice houses for use in the summer. Ice was used in ice boxes, the predecessors of modern refrigerators. An ice box was a simple insulated cabinet where a large block of ice was placed inside. The ice melted slowly, keeping the interior space cool, helping preserve food and drinks. Buying ice daily or weekly from the ice delivery man was a familiar part of life. And a simple but effective application of ice for cooling the air was placing a fan to blow over a block of ice. The airflow from the fan passing over the cold ice surface would be cooled before spreading into the space. Even high-ranking officials used this method. There's a story that this method was used to cool the room for President Garfield. While it didn't cool an entire large room, it created a flow of cool air right in front of the fan, providing comfort to someone sitting nearby. Fans are tools for moving air that have existed for thousands of years. We've talked about handheld fans, but there were many other types of fans. There were mechanical or human-powered fans. For example, fans attached to chairs, fans attached to rocking chairs, or fans powered by foot pedals. Even historical figures like Washington and Franklin experimented with these mechanical fans. They required human effort to create wind, but they worked non-stop as long as someone was operating them. Then came fans powered by motors, but not using electricity. Before electricity was common, people used motors powered by winding springs, kerosene, alcohol, or gas to spin the fan blades. These fans offered more convenience than human-powered fans, but still had limitations regarding fuel and noise. And then early electric fans were invented. Developed in the late 19th century by people like Schuyler Wheeler and Deal, electric fans were a major breakthrough. Initially, they were mainly used in places where electricity was available, such as factories, large stores, hotels, restaurants. It wasn't until the mid-20th century, when the electric grid became more widespread, that electric fans really became common in homes. The whirring sound of an electric fan placed on a table or floor is a characteristic sound of summer days past for many people. Ceiling fans even appeared before electric fans, initially powered by water through a system of ropes and pulleys. Later, Deal built the first electric ceiling fan. Ceiling fans helped circulate air effectively in a room, pushing hot air down and creating a cool feeling thanks to the continuous airflow. A particularly powerful and common type of fan in large houses was the whole house fan, or attic fan. Often installed in the ceiling of an upper floor hallway or in the attic, these large fans were designed to strongly pull all the hot air from the house up into the attic and push it out through vents. At the same time, it created a slight vacuum, drawing cooler air from outside into the house through all the open windows. For this fan to work effectively, you absolutely had to open windows on the lower floors. When the outside air in the evening began to cool down more than the air inside the house, turning on the attic fan could quickly lower the temperature of the entire house. However, they were usually very noisy. Anyone who slept under the roaring sound of a working attic fan will surely remember it well. Finally, there were window fans. These fans fit snugly into a window frame. You could orient them to blow air into the room or exhaust air out by using multiple window fans in different locations in the house. For example, placing one to exhaust hot air at one end of the house and one to blow cool air in at the other. You could create an even stronger cross-ventilation flow. Clothing and accessories. Can you believe that simply choosing the right clothes could make a huge difference in combating the heat? In the before AC era, this was extremely important. The first and most important choice was fabric material. People favored natural, breathable fabrics. Linen, with its cool, lightweight, and sweat-absorbent properties, was a top choice for summer clothing. Cotton was also very popular for its softness, breathability, and good absorbency. Even lightweight wool could be used on not too hot summer days or in the evening. Conversely, synthetic fabrics, the kind that trap heat and don't let sweat escape, were completely avoided in the summer. Do you remember the feeling of wearing a cool cotton shirt on a hot day? The color of clothes was also important. Light-colored fabrics, especially white, were very popular in the summer because they reflected sunlight better than dark colors, helping the body absorb less heat. Look at old photos of summers past, and you'll see many people wearing white or pastel colors. The style of clothing was also designed to optimize breathability. Clothes were often loose-fitting, not tight against the body. This allowed air to circulate better between the skin and the fabric, helping sweat evaporate more easily, cooling the body. Even simpler was reducing unnecessary layers of clothing. Wearing as few layers as possible allowed the body to breathe and feel more comfortable. And a simple yet effective body cooling technique was using damp clothing. Sweat is how the body cools itself. When sweat evaporates, it draws heat away. By wetting clothes, whether just from sweat or intentionally dampening a part, the evaporative cooling effect would increase, especially with a breeze. The feeling of a slightly damp shirt in the shade is hard to forget. Accessories also played an important role. Wide-brimmed hats were essential when going out in the intense sun, shielding the face and neck from direct sunlight. Umbrellas or parasols were also used more commonly than today. And of course, we can't forget handheld fans. From intricate imported silk and paper fans to those made from old newspapers, handheld fans were effective and readily available personal cooling tools. Sometimes, they were even a status symbol, later mass-produced and given away for advertising. However, there were also special cases where work regulations or safety required wearing clothing completely unsuitable for the heat. For example, women working in kitchens, near fires and high temperatures, sometimes still had to wear flame-retardant wool clothing regardless of how hot it was. That was a sacrifice for the job, a difficult aspect of life before AC. Is there anything from life before AC that you miss most? A specific memory? An unforgettable feeling? A distinctive smell of summers past? I would love to hear your story. And then everything changed. The arrival and popularization of modern air conditioning changed how we live, work, and even where we choose to settle. Initially, air conditioning was bulky, expensive, and not easy to install. They were mainly used in industrial or medical environments, such as hospitals and factories, where controlling temperature and humidity was necessary for machinery or patient health. One of the first public places that made AC familiar to many people was movie theaters. Imagine a blazing hot summer day outside, and you step into the cool, dark space of a movie theater. It was an incredibly appealing experience and a big reason for people to go to the movies. In fact, the appeal of air-conditioned movie theaters on hot summer days contributed to the concept we now call the summer blockbuster. Film studios realized that summer was a great time to release big movies, drawing audiences to the theater for both entertainment and escaping the heat. A major turning point happened in 1947, when more affordable window air conditioners began appearing on the market. This opened the door for AC installation in households. The process of popularization happened quite quickly after that. In 1960, only about 12% of U.S. households had AC. This number surged to 55% in 1980, and today, nearly 88% of households in the U.S. are equipped with air conditioning. That's a massive change in just a few decades. The popularity of AC has had profound impacts. First is the change in residential architecture. When people no longer relied on natural ventilation for cooling, house designs changed. Windows could be smaller, ceilings lower, and elements like sleeping porches or spacious central halls were no longer emphasized as before. Houses were built more tightly sealed to keep cold air inside as efficiently as possible. Second, AC stimulated population growth in hot regions. Previously, the summer heat in the South, Western U.S., Arizona, or Las Vegas was a major barrier to population growth. But with AC, these areas became much more livable, attracting millions of people to move there, creating a population boom in the Sun Belt. Third, and perhaps a less noticeable impact, is that AC has narrowed people's comfort zone. Once accustomed to living and working in temperature-controlled environments, our bodies become less adaptable to temperature changes. The heat that previous generations could tolerate, or at least get used to, feels extremely uncomfortable to today's generation. Finally, AC has changed living habits. We spend less time sitting on porches, less need to adjust work or leisure schedules according to the outside temperature. Life has become less connected to the rhythm of nature, and many activities have moved indoors, into air-conditioned environments. This transition marks a new era. It brought unprecedented comfort, higher productivity during hot months, and the ability to live in places that were previously unfeasible. But it has also made us forget the skills, ingenuity, and living habits that helped previous generations overcome the heat. Thanks for watching. We hope this journey back in time brought you some deep and surprising insights into a world long past. Share in the comments what surprised you the most about the world before the electric age. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next nostalgic trips.